Why your brain zones out at the worst moments. You need to read this document. It matters. You've read the first paragraph 4 times. The words are arriving, but nothing is sticking. You're not distracted. You're not tired. You're somewhere in between, present but unavailable. And the harder you try, the further the words seem to slide. Or you're in the most important meeting of the week. You need to be sharp. And somewhere between the second agenda item and the third, you realize you haven't heard a word for the last 3 minutes. You weren't asleep. You weren't distracted by your phone. You just left. This is not a focus problem. It is a brain management problem, and it has a very specific fix. You're listening to Your Space Today, the podcast where we decode fatigue, stress, and burnout so you can rise again. Every Tuesday, we explore the hidden connections between your habits, your health, and your happiness, giving you the tools to take back your energy and your life. There's something quietly humiliating about the moment of coming back. Not waking up, you weren't asleep, just re-entering. Noticing that the room kept going, that things were said, decisions were made, the conversation moved on, and you weren't there for any of it. You were somewhere that left no record. Tom knows this feeling better than he'd like to. He's 47. A senior lawyer, the kind of person who has spent his career being precise, in courtrooms, in negotiations, in long client dinners where every word carries weight. He does not get nervous. He does not zone out. Or at least, he didn't used to. But lately, in client calls, something strange has been happening. He'll be mid-argument, building a point he's made 100 times, and then notice he's staring at a fixed point on the wall. Thoughts elsewhere. No clear record of the last 30 seconds. The other person is still talking. He has no idea what they just said. He's told himself it's stress, or not enough sleep, or maybe he needs a holiday. What he hasn't considered is that his brain isn't failing. It is switching. And the network it's switching to is one of the most sophisticated systems in all of neuroscience. In a few minutes, I'll tell you exactly what that switch feels like from the inside, and the small, practical thing that stops it from happening at the worst possible moments. But first, let me tell you what's actually going on. Because here's what most advice on focus gets completely wrong. Your brain doesn't have one mode. It has 2, and they are constantly competing. The first mode is the one you're familiar with. Scientists call it the task-positive network. It's the state your brain enters when you're engaged with something external, following an argument, reading a document, solving a problem. It requires effort, it's deliberate, and it has a limited fuel supply. The second mode is something very different. Researchers call it the default mode network, the DMN. It's the brain state you enter during mind-wandering, self-reflection, daydreaming. When you're in the shower and the solution to a problem arrives uninvited. When you're staring out a train window and somehow processing something you haven't consciously thought about. That's the DMN doing its work. Here's the thing that makes this fascinating and important. These 2 networks are designed to cancel each other out. When one is active, the other is supposed to go quiet. You focus, the DMN suppresses. You rest, the task network steps back. It's an elegant system when it works. Research consistently shows that as the day goes on and cognitive fatigue builds, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for keeping the DMN suppressed, starts to lose its grip. Not suddenly, gradually, quietly, like a hand slowly releasing a tension it can no longer hold. And when that grip slips, the DMN breaks through, pulls your attention inward, not to anything specific, just away from where you need it to be. Tom isn't choosing to drift. His brain's focus enforcement mechanism is wearing out. Think of it like a browser with too many tabs open. The system keeps trying to run them all, and the tab you actually need keeps getting bumped to the background. You didn't close it. The computer just decided something else needed the processing power. The mind wandering you experience in important meetings? It's not the problem. The inability to prevent it is the problem. And that distinction changes everything, because it means the solution isn't more willpower. It's working with your brain's actual architecture. And if this leads you to ask, well, what is it that actually restores the brain's capacity to focus? Stay with that, because most advice points in exactly the wrong direction. The standard response to dazing out is to try harder. More effort, more coffee, more pressure, lean forward, pay attention. But here's what that actually does. It increases cognitive load, which is the very resource that's already running low. Trying harder to suppress the DMN when the prefrontal cortex is exhausted is like pressing harder on a brake pedal that's already failing. You feel like you're doing something, you're actually making it worse. The modern workplace compounds this perfectly. Open plan offices, constant notifications, back-to-back meetings with no buffer. All of these things fragment attention in small bursts, which is precisely the condition under which DMN intrusion is most likely to occur. The brain never gets a long enough stretch to build real focus, and it never gets a genuine enough break to restore it. What's interesting, and this is where it gets counterintuitive, is that the connections here run much deeper than focus alone. Blood sugar variability is one of the strongest predictors of how well the prefrontal cortex performs through the day. The dip that follows a high-carbohydrate lunch is doing measurable damage to your ability to stay present in the afternoon meeting. The evenings where you don't sleep well leave the attention control circuitry under-resourced before the day even starts. Brief movement, even a short walk, has been shown to temporarily restore prefrontal activation. And the chronic background hum of self-critical thinking keeps the DMN loaded with self-referential content, making it harder to suppress no matter how well-rested you are. These connections run deeper than most people realize. And if you want to explore how they interact in your own life, there's a link to our website below where you can dig into this further. So let me tell you what actually works, because it's simpler than you'd expect, and most people resist it precisely because it doesn't feel like trying hard enough. Here's how to work with this, step by step. The key insight is this. The brain's attentional system is not designed for continuous, unbroken focus. It operates in rhythms. And when you deny it those rhythms, it takes what it needs anyway, at the worst possible moments. The experiment is called the 2-break rule. Twice a day, once mid-morning, once mid-afternoon, you take a break of 5 to 10 minutes. And the rules matter. Not at your desk, not with your phone. You stand up. You move gently. A walk to another room, a few minutes outside, anything that gets your body out of the position it's been in. You look at something that isn't a screen. The timing is deliberate. Mid-morning catches the first accumulation of cognitive fatigue before it peaks and resets the system before the DMN gets a chance to intrude. Mid-afternoon hits the post-lunch prefrontal dip that most people experience somewhere between 2 and 4 p.m., the window when focus is lowest and the sense of drifting is worst. This is not a productivity hack. This is scheduled DMN activation. You are giving the brain's default mode its allotted window, so it stops taking one uninvited during your client call. Research on structured microbreaks during cognitively demanding work consistently shows something striking. People who take brief, intentional breaks away from the screen show better focus quality and fewer errors in the hours that follow, compared to people who work straight through. 2 breaks, 5 to 10 minutes, away from the screen, away from the phone. Tom started doing this 6 weeks ago. He felt slightly ridiculous the first few times, stepping away from his desk in the middle of the morning, doing nothing in particular. But he noticed something. The drifting started happening less. Not never, less. And in the moments that had always been worst, the late morning client call, the 3 p.m. review, he was simply more present. The brain, it turns out, responds very well to being given what it needs, rather than being pushed past it. If you recognized something in this episode, you'll know it's not a comfortable experience. Share it with someone who might be going through the same thing. Sometimes the most useful thing we can offer another person is simply the right explanation at the right moment. Thank you for listening. In the next episode, we look at the Sunday dread, that low hum of anxiety that settles in before the week has even started, and what your brain is actually trying to tell you when it does. Until then, take care of yourself. You deserve it. Your Space Today is published every Tuesday at 6 p.m. For detailed information, disclaimers, scientific references, visit the links below this podcast. This podcast is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with your healthcare provider regarding any health concerns.